Hi guys, Mike here with a big heart, and today I'm going to tell you all about the day that I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So in my first video I told you all about the day that I survived sudden cardiac arrest. If you haven't watched it yet, I urge you to do so. It really sets the stage for everything I'm going to talk about here. So here I'm going to talk about the day I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. That's a big, long word, and it's also known as HCM. So for this video, you're going to hear me refer to it as HCM. So what is HCM? HCM is basically an enlarged heart muscle, also a big heart. So if you remember in my last video, I survived sudden cardiac arrest. I got to the hospital, and I was in a very, very critical state. And that first night, my parents sat there, and a doctor had said to them that there was a very good chance that I had heart disease, and that when I was conscious and when I was in a better spot, that they were going to put me through a bunch of different tests to determine what caused my sudden cardiac arrest. So after I was in the hospital for a day, they took out the ventilator, and I opened my eyes. I said hi to my mom, and I asked her, what was I doing here? Why was I in the hospital? And she said to me that I had gone into sudden cardiac arrest, and that I was very lucky to survive, and I was just recovering, and everything was going to be okay. So I smiled, and I looked at her, and I said okay, and I would look the other way for a minute, and then I'd look back at my mom, and I'd say, "Mom, what am I doing here?" And this lasted for about a day and a half. I had no short-term memory. And I had gone into sudden cardiac arrest and did not receive CPR right away. So there was a lack of oxygen that was going to my brain. So the doctors were worried that this short-term memory loss could last forever. And it was really bizarre because, I would remember something that we had done as a family 10 years ago. But I couldn't remember reading a card that was right next to my hospital bed. Or I couldn't remember a visitor that came in that I talked to. But when that visitor was in the room, I could have a full conversation with them. I could tell them about a pickup basketball game that we played last year. But I couldn't, when they left the room, I had no recollection that they were even there. So those lasted about a day and a half. And the first day that I remember when I was in the hospital was my day of testing. I had woken up one morning, and the doctors came in and said, okay, we're going to put you through a bunch of different tests to figure out what caused your sudden cardiac arrest. And it was a very grueling day. So it started with an electrocardiogram, also known as an ECG or EKG. And that's a very simple, quick, less than 5-minute test. Basically, they take a bunch of electrodes or little stickers. They put them across your chest, put them on your wrist, put them on your ankles, attach some wires to them, press a button. You don't feel anything, and then it basically prints out a test of your heart rhythm. And being that I have HCM, and they didn't know this at the time, but when they saw my EKG, they had a pretty good idea, because I had a very, very abnormal EKG that is very normal, I guess, for someone that has HCM, not normal for a person who does not have heart disease. After that, they did an echocardiogram. An echocardiogram is kind of like an ultrasound just on your heart. It's very similar to the test that pregnant women get when they're checking the baby. But they take some goo, and they take a sensor, and they rub it around, and they basically take images of your heart that a doctor can read and determine whether or not there's thickness in different parts of the heart. After that was the two hardest tests of the day. First up was a cardiac MRI. So they actually put me on a wheelchair. They wouldn't let me walk around, so they put me on a wheelchair down to the room where I was getting the test done. And I remember they had me lay flat on my back, and they slide you into a very, very closed-in space. The ceiling felt like it was just inches away from my eyes, and I was on kind of like a rubber mat. If you could kind of imagine like an athletic trainer's table, kind of like that material. And I had my hospital gown on, and I was just really anxious and nervous with everything going on. It was a really loud test. They gave me some headphones to listen to some music, but what they told me to do is to sit still. And the more still that I sat, the quicker the MRI would be. Unfortunately, because of the anxiety, because, I was starting to sweat and my legs were starting to stick to the mat, I kept moving them around, and every time the tech would take a picture, she would say, I have to redo that one because you're moving. And it was just a grueling 4 hours of a loud, just me sweating and kind of freaking out a little bit. But I remember being so relieved when they pulled me out of that machine. And not all cardiac MRIs are 4 hours. The reason it took 4 hours is because I just wasn't able to sit still. And since the MRI took so long, they pulled me down for a cardiac catheterization. That was going to be the final test that they gave me to determine what was going on. And a cardiac catheterization actually involves anesthesia, because they take small pictures of your heart, and they will go in through your groin and down through your neck, and they want to take some biopsies of your heart to figure out what's going on. So I had the cardiac catheterization, and they said basically the next day the doctor was going to evaluate the results of all the tests and come in and give me a diagnosis. So I remember that next day very clearly. I had all these visitors coming in and out to keep me distracted, family, friends. It was great, but I'll never forget the day the doctor came in, and she explained a lot to me. She explained that she had good and bad news for me, and she said the good news is that you went into sudden cardiac arrest and survived. And then she gave me some statistics, and she said that 365,000 people suffer in out-of-hospital sudden cardiac arrest each year across the United States, and that less than 10% of those people survive. And she told me that my odds of survival were 1 in a million because I did not receive CPR right away, because I did not receive a shock from an AED right away, that my odds of survival were very, very low, and I was very, very lucky to be here. And she also gave me my diagnosis. She told me I was diagnosed with a disease called Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy, also known as HCM. And she explained that it's actually more common than people realize. It affects about 1 in 500 people, and it affects people of all ages. And she explained that it's a genetic condition, which was life-changing for our family, because one of my parents had to have the disease to pass it to me, and neither one of them knew they had it. I had a younger brother who was an aspiring college basketball player. Does he have the disease? So on top of this very anxiety-filled time for us, just because of what happened with me, now all of a sudden it was really a family problem that we were very, very concerned about. But she kind of talked to me about what was next. So like I said before, she said she had good and she had bad news, and that was the good news. So you can imagine the bad news was that I would never be allowed to play competitive basketball again. And if you remember in my last video, I explained how I thought basketball defined me as a person. I thought it was my purpose in life. My goal was to be a college basketball player. I was starting to get recruited by college coaches to play basketball in college, and all of that was taken away from me in that conversation with my cardiologist. And I remember having very, very mixed feelings, because I was just told I had a 1 in a million chance of surviving. So I felt very lucky to be alive and happy about that. But I also felt more feelings of anger and sadness and depression and frustration, because I was no longer going to be allowed to play basketball again. And that was really the biggest part of my life. So it was a really, really hard day. On top of all of that, again, the fear of, does my little brother have this disease? Which one of my parents has this disease? And how is it going to affect us going forward? And it was hard for all of us that day that I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The day I survived sudden cardiac arrest is a day that definitely had a huge impact on my life. But the day I was diagnosed with HCM had equally or an even bigger impact on my life for sure.